Greetings. It's good to be able to be with you, at least on the screen this morning, as you start your morning of reflection. And I hope it may be both a profitable one for you and an enjoyable one. It'll be my second visit on screen to Teme Valley South. I'm really looking forward to actually placing my feet on the earth there and coming to see you. Your churches have been centres of blessing for your communities for many, many years, and I know they continue to be that through your ministry today. So may your reflections today give you some new insights into what God might be calling you to these coming years. But above all, may it reassure you and deepen your understanding that you are indeed that blessing in those communities and that blessing to one another. So have a good day. May God bless you, and may you enjoy yourselves as well. Thank you, and bye-bye.
So Alison, welcome to Teme Valley South. It's great that you were able to come out and join us today.
Thank you, Julia. It's been lovely, and thank you for taking the time to show me around all 7 churches. They're really special.
You're very welcome. So Alison, you've been appointed as Dean of Smaller Churches, and I think it'd be really helpful if you could just tell us a little bit about what that is and what you'll be doing.
Yeah, happy to do so. I've been appointed to work right across the diocese to try and help the smallest of our churches to find ways to really flourish. Nearly half the churches in this diocese will count as small churches, and an awful lot of these are currently struggling one way or another, and we just need to do things differently. We need to find ways of working differently. So I'm going to be working with clergy and other church leaders just to find ways to work better for smaller churches. I haven't got the answers, I've got lots of questions, but hopefully together we can do that. Some of our churches find it really hard to get officers, and that's a growing problem. And where that's the case, we need to find simpler ways to keep the churches going. For others, it's the maintenance of the buildings that is really becoming so difficult. So we're going to see if we can find practical ways to help with this. And often it's finances that are the big worry, and we need to be supporting efforts to both raise money and reduce costs to try and bring things back into a manageable state. There just aren't easy answers. I haven't got those up my sleeve, but I'm convinced if we do work together well and prayerfully, we will find good ways to be healthy and sustainable in every church.
And of course that is the aim, and it all sounds very positive, but I guess one of the burning questions that we've got around here in such a rural area is, does this mean that we're going to be having to close churches?
Assuming that you mean close church buildings,
Okay.
then in most cases closing churches will actually do more harm than good. Whether the buildings are open or closed, they still need to be maintained and kept safe. So closing them doesn't actually solve anybody's problems. When they're open, they can act as a really good focus for their community and as a way of telling the story of the love of God for everyone. And closed, they would tell a much less helpful story. So we may not be able to maintain services in every church every Sunday as we have done in the past. In fact, I think those days have already gone.
Certainly here.
But we just need to work really closely together to work out what each of the buildings does best and what each one can contribute to the life of the community around it, and then let that be what it is for both that local community and also the wider community. I think for far too long there's been a sense of competition between churches, perhaps coming out of the worry about, are we going to have to close churches? In which case, is it going to be this one or is it going to be the next one along?
Absolutely.
And actually we need to stop doing that, and we need to really work together and support each other, help each and every one to flourish, and then they all will, I'm sure.
Thank you. So what do you think that small churches can do to secure their future?
Really good question. I think it's a bit trite, but first and foremost, listen to God.
Okay.
Churches are where people are gathered in God's name, and He has not ever and still has never and never will abandon them. So listen to God. Ask the question of God. What's this church for? Every church has got a precious story to tell, and the story of the future will come from the story of the past. The story of the future is not a new, different story. It's part of the one that's already been told.
Yeah.
So we need to hear that story and then hear how is God calling that church going forwards. I do believe in some places the church building will be absolutely at the centre of that story going forwards.
Yep.
In some places it might not. In some places it might be better for the church to find a way of being that's less dependent on the building, especially in the middle of winter.
Yes.
We may not be best heating these really very difficult buildings in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
We may be better finding other ways of being church. God's still calling people to be Christians, but not necessarily to worship in the ways that we have always done and in the places we've always done. So let's listen to people. Let's hear their stories. Let them tell their story. And in the midst of that, I believe that's where we'll hear what God is up to. Supporting one another.
Yes. Yeah.
Really matters, doesn't
Yeah,
it? Really does.
Yeah.
And I think if each church can find their way of having their own identity and then look at how that adds up to the whole and how they're richer together, then it will be an exciting and enriching time for small churches.
Yes, yeah, thank you. So how long do you think all of this might take? Is it something we're going to solve by Christmas maybe?
Ooh, how long is a piece of string? It's a journey, not a destination.
Okay.
God's been working with churches across millennia, and that story will just keep going on.
Yeah.
And we're just walking a bit of that path. I think we just need to let God keep calling us on, showing us the way. I always love the quote by William Blake: "I give you the end of a golden string, only wind it into a ball, it will lead you in at heaven's gate, built in Jerusalem's wall." And I just think that sense of just keeping picking up that golden string and just winding will bring us towards God's purposes.
Thank you. And that golden thread is something that we often talk about here, about going through creation and in the wonderful part of the Teme Valley that we're in. Yeah. So thank you very much, Alison. And Alison is going to be outside to hear your stories and to take questions and comments too. So do find her and have a word with her. Thank you.
Thank you.
So some reflections there from Reverend Alison Maddox, who's the Dean of Smaller Churches here for the Diocese of Worcester. Some really helpful food for thought for us about how we might go forward together. And that reminds me of the strapline that we have as churches in Teme Valley South, which is a community going forward with God. And I remember when I came here for my interview, I said as part of that, I'm not sure it is a community going forward with God, because what I'd already picked up from going around the churches and having the interview process was that there were 7 communities going forward with God in Teme Valley South. And I'm wondering whether our future might lie in recognising that we are different communities, different church buildings, different fresh expressions of church, but celebrating that and celebrating our differences and doing the things together that we can do effectively together, so that we become communities who are working together going forward with God. And I think what's happened with the COVID pandemic has almost forced our hand to think differently. We were suddenly confronted with a situation in March last year where the ways that we were used to working and the ways that we were used to being church in church buildings was no longer possible. So we had to start again and we had to rethink things. And it's been a great encouragement to me in the midst of all of the difficulties that we've had, that actually new things have developed and God has been working amongst us and we've been able to do things in different ways. We've worshipped together online twice a day, coming together for morning prayer and for Compline to pray for our communities and to walk through this difficult time together. So we've done that on Zoom, and it's been something that's gone across Teme Valley South. It hasn't just been one church, it's been representatives from most of our churches, and actually we've had a rotation of praying for each of our churches each week. And I think that's been a really important thing for us in the past few months, but also to keep going forward as well. We've enjoyed doing online services, and the way that those have developed has been great fun, and we've been able to reach people on Facebook that wouldn't be able to connect with us in the way that they would in a physical building. So that's been another positive as well, and I hope that we'll be able to continue doing some pre-recorded online worship too. So other things that have developed during this time is that we had appointed Eve as our administrator part-time at the beginning of lockdown, and so during the last 15 months we've been working together, and Eve has been developing that administration role, and also Jen has been working alongside Eve in a really constructive partnership to provide administrative support, which for me has just been such a blessing from God to know that some of the things that I was spending my time on are now covered in that way. And that's an admin function that works across Teme Valley South, not just focused on one church. It serves all of us. And the other thing that Eve has been doing is working with me using some funding from the Arthur Rank Centre on a project with rural isolation and loneliness. And as part of that, we were giving out Easter bags to the families. We've got a database now with our families, and we're looking at ways to connect with them. And also the Mothering Sunday initiative, when we took out a little something to, I think, 55 people nearly across Teme Valley South. With the help of the pastoral visitors and people working locally, we were able to distribute these small gifts, which actually meant a huge amount to people during that difficult time. But we worked together to coordinate that across Teme Valley South. And these are some examples of how we can work more centrally. But equally, our churches and our communities are all different and all individual places. So it's important that we begin to think about what our strengths might be, what's best about a particular local church, the way it's sited or the community it's in, and develop that and go forward with that and celebrate that. And we don't all have to be the same, and we don't all have to be in competition. Let's work together to make our future a positive one as we go forward as God's church together in this place.